This week I'd ask you to read pieces by Chaucer and Cosby. There's not really a connection between these two pieces per se. They're very different, and there's different things we're going to take from each of them. I've chosen the Cosby narrative because it's a hilarious story, and it's an excellent example of comic narrative. So by the time we finish this trimester, you'll have been exposed to an epic narrative in Beowulf, a modern novel, Cry the Beloved Country, a Chaucerian tale, and also this comic story. You could find the text of the Cosby story to read if you want to as well, but listening to him tell it is a great experience. As you listen, note which devices he uses in the story. Think about what's different about these than those, say, in a serious piece of rhetoric like Pericles' funeral oration. We've considered the structure of Beowulf. How does the structure of this story compare? Think about how it begins, progresses, and ends. There's a discussion board post opportunity for you to say basically anything that strikes you about this story as narrative. Now let's talk about Chaucer. If you haven't read it before, you might really enjoy reading the general prologue to Canterbury Tales, though I'm not going to require it for this class. I posted a video on the website of the first section of the prologue being read aloud, so you can see how different the language sounded. Not as strange as Beowulf since we're getting closer chronologically, but still far into our ears. Basically, we have a group of 29 pilgrims, who are really just regular people of all professions and walks of life, on their way to visit Thomas à Becket's tomb in Canterbury. They meet up because they're all staying at an inn called the Tabard. The inn's host, who's looking to make some money off of them on their return, proposes that to pass the long ride on horseback, they take turns telling tales for one another's amusement. He suggests that each of them should tell 2 tales on the way there, and 2 more on the way back. Chaucer intended to write all of these tales, but he didn't get a chance to finish them before his death. Many editions of the tales also don't include all of them that he did write, so the list you have in your book may only be partial of what actually exists. Then the teller of the best tales, by the host's judgment, would get a free meal when they returned. Everyone agrees, and they draw straws to see who will go first, which the knight wins, and they set off on their trip. Before they leave, though, Chaucer gives a description of each of the pilgrims. Here's what he says about the clerk, or the cleric. An Oxford cleric, still a student though, one who'd taken logic long ago, was there. His horse was thinner than a rake, and he was not too fat, I undertake, but had a hollow look, a sober stare. The thread upon his overcoat was bare. He found no preferment in the church, and he was too unworldly to make search for secular employment. By his bed he preferred having 20 books in red and black of Aristotle's philosophy, than costly clothes, fiddle, or psaltery. Though a philosopher, as I have told, he had not found the stone for making gold. Whatever money from his friends he took, he spent on learning or another book, and prayed for them most earnestly, returning thanks to them thus for paying for his learning. His only care was study, and indeed he never spoke a word more than was need. Formal at that, respectful in the extreme, short to the point and lofty in his theme. A tone of moral virtue filled his speech, and gladly would he learn, and gladly teach. When you begin the story, be sure to read the clerk's prologue as in the beginning, and then also read Chaucer's envoy to the tale at the end as well. There are 2 different questions I'd ask you to think about for your discussion board post this week. You can choose one of them, and here's a little bit of information about each of them for your consideration. The first question I've asked is for you to consider whether either of 2 metaphors are accurate readings for the clerk's tale. By readings, I mean that literary scholars have proposed interpretations of what the author might have meant through the story. So scholars have said that the story could be a portrayal of God and man. In this reading, Walter is God, and he puts man, represented in Griselda, through a series of tests like Job was tested to try his faithfulness. When he proves faithful, God ultimately rewards him greatly. The other metaphor I'd like you to consider is that of Christ and Satan. Some have proposed that Walter has devilish characteristics in the story, and that he takes the role of tempter to Christ in the form of Griselda. Now, to us reading the modern English versions of this story, these readings could seem a little far out, because much of them is based on wordplay in the Middle English. But consider these points of view as they stand for you, and think about whether either of them could be accurate. The other option I've given you to consider is the moral implications of the tale. In the introduction, Chaucer says that the clerk is always anxious to convey a moral. At the end of the tale, he does propose a moral for it. Then in Chaucer's envoy, Chaucer gives his own moral interpretation of the events. So think about this. Which of the two morals stated does the tale actually convey? Is there another implied moral that neither Chaucer nor the clerk explicitly state? Do you think the moral of a tale can be other than what the author intends it to be? If that's the case, I'd like you to choose what you think the moral of the story is, and then to conclude from that what we can imply about morals from the one that you did choose. Hopefully these topics will add a bit more of opinion, and thus controversy, so we can have more of a lively discussion on the discussion board this week.